You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
Growing up, I think I didn't just find a lot of platforms and forums where I was seeing the stories or the experiences or the lives of women being amplified. LLA really started off as an editorial platform where I was going to dig deep and find African women all over the world and tell their stories and use that as a tool to inspire other women who are coming up. If in 2021 we trained 1,000 female entrepreneurs, in 2023, where and what stage of their businesses are they, and what particular interventions do they need now?
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find inspirational people who are doing inspirational things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today, we have Francesca Uriri, who is the co-founder of Leading Ladies Africa, which is a women-focused non-profit whose mission is to promote gender inclusivity and diversity by increasing participation and representation of women of African origin in fields of business, politics, and advocacy. Welcome to the podcast, Francesca. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, Tessa. I'm great. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Brilliant. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I believe you're calling us all the way from Dallas, Texas.
I'm currently based in Dallas, Texas. Yes.
Fantastic. How are things in Dallas?
It's really hot today.
I'm jealous.
It's so hot. So no, I would do anything for to have cool weather. It's ridiculous. It's hotter in a way that doesn't even make sense. And I'm saying that as a Nigerian.
It must be hot.
It is really hot.
I'm not sure if you've listened to the podcast before, but I like to start from the beginning. So I was hoping you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Francesca.
Awesome. So yes, I have listened to the podcast, and I do listen to the podcast a couple of times. So yes. In terms of introduction, yes, like you said, my name is Francesca, co-founder of Leading Ladies Africa, a women-focused nonprofit that champions gender equality, diversity, and inclusion for African women and for women of African descent. Obviously, I'm also a corporate communications professional, and I currently lead internal comms for diversity, equity, and inclusion at Meta.
Yes.
So I often like to say that I have 2 full-time jobs that I love.
Thank you for that introduction. So you've touched upon this. So I was hoping you could tell us just a bit more about Leading Ladies Africa and its mission to promote gender inclusivity and diversity.
Yeah. So first, I think what might help to give context to that is understanding why it was set up in the first place.
Yes.
So obviously, I'm Nigerian and I'm from Africa, and we come from a deeply patriarchal system that often sees women, but doesn't encourage women to be impactful. I mean, a lot of that is changing now. But growing up, I think I didn't just find a lot of platforms and forums where I was actively seeing, the stories or the experiences or the lives of women being amplified. Right? It was always just random stuff, or it was always more on the gossip side or gossip blogs. And please, no shade to gossip blogs. That's fine. But I was a young girl in my 20s, really looking for the sense of having strong female models, particularly those of African descent. And they just weren't available at that time, or they weren't accessible to me. And so I thought hey, if I'm having this problem or if I'm having this challenge, I imagine that other women my age are having this issue as well. So LLA really started off as an editorial platform where I was you know what, I'm going to dig deep and find African women all over the world and tell their stories and use that as a tool to inspire other women who are coming up. And I know that inspiration gets a lot of flack these days. Like, oh, why are we like? How powerful is it? I think it's a huge catalyst for change. And so that's how we started out with just like the editorial pieces and like the features of African women doing amazing things. So African politicians, African female entrepreneurs, and all of that. And when we started, people then started to ask about like, hey, like, do you have any of these programs? Do you have programs? Do you have events? We really want to be. So basically, I saw that I was right, that there was a need for women to have the tools, have the skills, have the information, have the education to really advance themselves in whatever field that they found themselves in. And so that's kind of like how it started. In terms of the mission, I'm very clear that our target audience is women of African descent and African women. And again, for me, I think it's very important to be targeted. I'm African, I'm Nigerian. I, more than most people, really understand what it is like to be a woman who was raised in a patriarchal society, who was raised in a society that says, it's okay to see women, but like, we don't want you doing like all of that stuff. We don't want you like succeeding, or we don't want you, doing any of that. And I wanted to show like there are women who are actually doing this. My grandmother was someone who was doing that. We have people like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, we have Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, we have Ibuka Onwuchika. There's a litany of women who disprove this theory. So now we're really just focused on the programmatic aspects, like how do we really build skills? How do we really build capacity? And why is that important? And of course, we still do a lot of like the editorial work. But in these days, we're really just focused on programs that help us advance this mission.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So you've detailed what inspired you to start Leading Ladies Africa and also the mission. You've mentioned that some things have changed during the time that you've started the organization. Going back to how would you describe the current state of, say, gender inclusivity and diversity in Africa in areas such as leadership, business, politics, and advocacy?
Yeah. I mean, let's even talk about the SDGs, right? So like the Sustainable Development Goals, it says that like this is data for gender equality. It will take women 250 years to get to the place of equality. I'm going to be dead. My children will probably be dead. Maybe my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren will be alive. And I'm putting that in context because in terms of how far we've come, I think a lot of people always say, oh, like we've had like a female president, Erling Sirleaf Johnson in Liberia. We have the president in Tanzania. Oh, like we're making a lot of change. And I'm like, yes, we are. However, there's still a long way to go. Again, bringing it back to the African continent, we've seen a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of change, but a lot of that change is not sustainable. Or it's not sustained changes. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So, for example, every time we see a female deputy governor, using maybe Nigeria for an example, we see like it's either or. So it's like we'll have a female deputy governor, but we can't have a female governor, a female deputy governor, and a female chief of staff. It's kind of like we have to keep tokenizing women. So even though there are all of these advancements, we still have, especially in Africa, we still have like large swaths and like large generations or like populations of women who are still not advancing in the way that they should. And of course, we can talk about that as we go along. There are many like social, cultural, political, economic reasons for that, but there's still a long way to go. I think like the idea of being comfortable because we have one president here or one prime minister here or one governor here or like a minister here should not make us comfortable. I think that countries like Rwanda, who have like 60% cabinet representation of women, should really be the ideal across Africa. But like we can see, like that's not happening. And so we'll continue to push until all of this, hopefully, until we see more sustained movements.
I agree. As you mentioned, in Africa, we have seen a lot of growth, but that growth or change is not sustainable.
No.
So how does Leading Ladies Africa aim to increase the participation and representation of African women in the fields of leadership, business, politics?
Yeah. So what we found was we all know what the problem is, right? But instead of, I think it was Maya Angelou or someone who said, instead of like crying in the dark, light a candle. And for us, it's like, this is the problem. We can have thousands of events or thousands of one-off conferences where people come and like take pictures and like we have all these speeches. But if we're not building like a funnel, if we're not building a funnel of female political leaders, if we're not building a funnel of female entrepreneurs, if we're not championing workplace advocacy consistently, then nothing is going to happen. And so what LLA, the bridge there is we are equipping with skills. So we have programs. Hey, you want to be a director in 10 years? Sign up for the Career Advancement and Mentorship Program. We're going to pay you with a mentor. You're going to have actionable skills. How do I negotiate? How do I negotiate for a pay increase? How do I negotiate for a promotion? How do I deal with a challenging manager? We're going to give you actionable skills and short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals that actually put you on the path of actually achieving that. We're doing that also with our enterprise and leadership program for female entrepreneurs. Like, it's all well and good to keep chasing funding, but if your books are not in order, if you don't understand what budgeting is, if you don't understand what branding is, if you don't understand what leadership development is to help you hire the right staff that help you build a sustainable business, then it's just going to be like the dog chasing its tail round and round and round in circles. So we are in the place of really providing skills, information, and education that actually help this woman get into the funnel. And here's the thing, right? Getting into the funnel is one thing. Staying in the funnel is another. We have the data that shows that women get into the workforce, but they're checking out. They check out for different reasons. Oh, I'm married, I have kids. Oh, I can't do all of these things at the same time. We have women who start businesses. Women in sub-Saharan Africa, the fastest growing population of women who are starting businesses in the world. But are they sustained? Do they have access to funding? Do they know how to like scale their businesses in a profitable and sustainable way? So basically, Leading Ladies Africa is enabling. We're an enabler, right? We're providing platforms and programs where these women have actionable skills that contribute to our mission statements.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So you've detailed the strategies and programs that you use to enable and equip the women to advance. I know one of your target audiences for your program are upwardly mobile, internet-savvy women aged between 21 and 50.
Yeah.
So how would you go about engaging with this specific group?
So we realized when we started LLA, we realized that the internet, again, like technology is a great, should I say, enabler as well.
Yes.
Technology helped us to reach women across the world. Technology helped us to reach women in Canada, African women in Canada, women in Zimbabwe, women in Nigeria, Ghana, and all of that stuff. So technology helps, right? But we also found that we had to have in-person, on-site, real-time programs. Again, because, it's okay to have like a couple of Zoom calls, and I'm not knocking any sort of like virtual programs, but we found that in-person interaction and networking also helps women build. So for example, our enterprise and leadership program, we just concluded like a cohort in Warri in Nigeria. It's a Niger Delta South region, where we had over 500 women for a week of training and bonding and networking and learning. They had come off an 8-month period where they had all of these virtual classes and conversations. So technology is great, but for me, it doesn't have to be either or. It's and technology and especially also understanding our African context. Africans are deeply communal people.
Yes.
And our women more so. And so it helps for you to be like, oh, I have that problem. Oh, I have that problem too. Oh, I'm based in Jigawa, but I have the same staffing issues. Oh, I'm based in Nairobi, but I have the same issues with branding and marketing. That strengthens like the in-class and like the learning opportunities that we present to them. So for us, it's technology, but also on-site experiences we found also enhance all of that training and leadership development that we're doing.
So you mentioned it's the complementing of the online and offline in terms of enabling you to reach that specific target audience. So if we look outside in terms of reaching the audience and how you actually utilize technology within the program, would you say that technology has played a huge role in enabling you to actually carry out some of the programs and activities for the success of?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I would say that. So, for example, there's a huge digital component to the work we do. We would reach out to these women on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and LinkedIn. Facebook is still alive, guys. I keep I know it's hard to believe, but the Blue app is still kicking strong, right? So having those digital platforms, first of all, you want to reach out to a CEO on LinkedIn, she doesn't know you. Maybe she's in South Africa. And the only way that she's able to validate what you're telling her is to go look at your digital footprint.
Yes.
To say, okay, let's see, have they talked to anybody else that's similar to me? And that helps. So in terms of outreach and even building these relationships has been incredibly helpful. The second part is our programs themselves. So for example, the Career Advancement and Mentorship Program is completely virtual. And we have women from all over the world. The last cohort had women from Canada, women from Senegal, women from all over the world really joining in that program. Because here's the thing, if you're a Black woman in Silicon Valley, you're a Black woman in Nigeria, you're a Black woman in Kenya, there's some issues that are specific to just you because you're a Black woman or you're African women. Somebody hears your accent, for example, and thinks that you're not the smartest person in the room, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we can get into that, but that's my gripe. But technology, super really helped us with the Career Advancement and Mentorship Program because it brought that whole global outlook to the work that we're doing. The third part is now monitoring and evaluation. We have the surveys that we often send out. We have our WhatsApp leadership circles. We have our community building sessions. A lot of the work that we do is facilitated. And I know that I've spoken about insight, but I think on-site connections. But without technology, I just don't see how we would have made this impact or made this reach. Coca-Cola Foundation, who partnered with us for our Enterprise and Leadership Program, we're only able to do that because, again, they looked at the digital footprint, they've done this program before, they did this and they did that. So I'm so glad that we have technology to enable and advance the work that we do. And we'll continue to find ways, whether it's building a digital workplace for women, whether it's building an app, the possibilities are endless. So yes, I would say that technology has definitely played a huge part.
Thank you for that. So I guess if we kind of stick on a theme in terms of the different groups of women you work with, I believe you also work or have a focus on lower income women, the unbanked. That's a very different group to internet savvy 21 and 50-year-olds. So what specific challenges or barriers do they face in accessing funding and some of the, say, macroeconomic support that's required for that specific group?
Yeah, I think one of the first things, obviously, you've pointed out, a lot of these women are unbanked. And again, maybe that's a conversation for another day. Not only are they unbanked, they have a lot of suspicion
Yes.
for banking institutions. It's just no, I will keep my money under my bed or under my pillow because that's what my grandma did and that's what my mother did. And I think for us, we then found that a lot of these women are running thriving businesses, which they've done over the course of the years. So the first thing for us was, first of all, understanding, because I think there's also a lot of arrogance from sometimes displayed by digital natives. It's oh, but why don't you have these systems? Or why aren't you using this machine? It's first of all, look at them and marvel at the fact that in 2023, somebody is running a business where her supplies, for example, she doesn't have an online or a technological system where she's checking her product, but she's doing the business. She's making money, she's generating income, and she has been doing it for a couple of years. So the first thing, obviously, is understanding, but helping them see that there is a more efficient way. So if you're a trader, for example, in bull markets, is there a more efficient way for you to track your stock? And is there software that can help you track your stuff when you get them from Balogun market. Same thing for women in Ghana, right? When you go to Kotoka market, is there a more sustainable way for you to be pricing your products? For agricultural entrepreneurs, is there a more sustainable way? Do you want to look at how, you store like your produce more efficiently and more effectively? So for those sort of women, it's very real time, and it's very going to them with a sense of understanding, like they've been doing it, but showing them ways that further enhance their business. And so for us, what we've typically done with groups like that is that we do a lot of community building sessions. So for example, we will go to markets we'll go to the Balogun market, we'll go to Mushi markets in Nigeria, we'll go to Kotoka in Ghana, and really have these huge forums, and again, it's just understanding that there's also like a politics element, because these women have like large unions, they have large women market leaders, and really just bringing our offerings in a way that is respectful, in a way that doesn't scare them off, and in a way that shows that, this is for their benefit. I will say very honestly that uptake for these sort of women is extremely low, because there's just that suspicion. It's like, why should I count it on the computer when I can count it by my hand? Like, are you telling me my hands don't work? Or like, I don't know what I'm saying. So there's a lot of education for that particular group that we have to do. But I also think it's important to state here that they are not, again, like the arrogance that I refer to. They do not know what they're doing. A lot of these women have built successful businesses for decades and centuries even. And I think that we have to respect that. But do some of the offerings that we present to them enhance their businesses? Definitely. So it's just having patience and being mindful of sort of like the cultural and societal nuances that impact their adoption of newer, more efficient technology support.
Fantastic. So you've given us great insights into the work that you do with these two distinct groups in terms of internet savvy women and women from more lower income backgrounds. So how do you go about measuring and tracking the progress that you've made to achieving your goals with these two separate groups?
Yeah. So again, I think I spoke briefly about monitoring and evaluation models. We have different models for different programs. Obviously, the way that you track sort of like the career advancement program is not the same way that you're going to track the enterprise and leadership program. But the one thing that I'll speak about again is technology. So a simple way, for example, is surveys, right? If we trained someone in 2021, we have information of her business, how many staff she has on her payroll, how many branches, for example, of her business she has, what what problems is she struggling with, and things like that. And then over the next couple of years or over the next year, we will do interventions like leadership circles. We will do coaching programs with the business coaches that we have. And over the next year, we then go back and say, last year you were here. Where are you now? And we have surveys that collect that information. We have, like I said, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is hugely popular, by the way, really, really popular with women. We have WhatsApp leadership circles. We have Zoom sessions where we try to get the information that is required to see where they are. So it's very long term, but basically we're collecting data, we're measuring that data, and we're seeing the efficacy of what we're doing. So if in 2021, we trained 1,000 female entrepreneurs, in 2023, where are they and what stage of their businesses are they? And what particular interventions do they need now? So it's sort of like a constant thing. And then, of course, we apply different methodologies for different groups.
Fantastic. So earlier on, you mentioned a core area of your activities is creating content to empower African women and promote gender equality. So in an African context, what do you believe is the importance of content creation towards the work that you're doing?
So I'll answer that, but I'll give an example, right? When the world watched Wakanda,
Yes.
it was like, oh my God, Black can be scientific and a superhero and entertaining and all of this wonderful stuff. And that made people feel like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. And that's the power of creating content, right? Because you then show women, first of all, who they are. So again, there are a lot of narratives around like Africa as a whole, as a continent, and then specifically for African women. I kid you not, I've had people say to me like, oh, thankfully I haven't got do you have like lions and zebras like where you live? But I've had deeply problematic comments like, oh, they speak English in Nigeria. And I'm like, no, actually, we just count with sticks and stones. Like, duh. So there's a lot of perceptions and misconceptions about Africans and like African women. And so when you create content to show a CEO in Botswana, or you show a broadcaster in South Africa, or you show a group of young women who are creating a windmill in Ghana, what you're showing African women is that there is no limit to how they can dream and who they can be. So our content arm is hugely important as well to the work that we do, because it's kind of like it supports the work by visualizing. And visualizing is very important. If you sit down and think, like for example, when I was in my early 20s, I couldn't count on my finger African women CEOs.
Yes.
I couldn't count on my finger African women in the workplace. I just could not. I'm sure they existed, but I couldn't dream of that reality. But for younger women today, they can. They have a list. They have places to go research. They have, like, just going to Little Ladies Africa, we have a list for every single thing. We have a list of African PR mavens. We have a list of 50 corporate women in Africa. We have a list of 100 most inspiring women in Nigeria. If you need it, we found it, and we're going to give it to you. Because visualization for the future that we desire is so important. And I think not just for women, but also for men. The more that you see what you can become, the more you know that you can become that thing. So our content development really is that thing that strengthens our work by visualizing the impact and contributions of these women globally.
Thank you for that. So you've elaborated on the power of content and its ability to support and connect the work that you do. So if you look specifically at what kind of content does Leading Ladies Africa create, and how does it resonate with your target audience?
So we do a lot of what I call editorial content. So we'll do features. We do, again, like 12 female African photographers you should know. This is an example. Or 9 African PR mavens you should know. We do a lot of editorial content. But because we are in such a digital age, we also share that across like our digital media platforms. So we have a very, very engaged, very active digital community, social media community. So we have cumulatively, I think, over 300,000 followers across our social media platforms, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, yes, and on TikTok. And so what we're doing is that we're creating these editorial pieces, but we're also adapting them for each of our various communities. So for example, we know that the Zs on TikTok don't like too much text, don't like long videos. So we will create like really short, bite-sized pieces of videos where they're inspired, where they receive education, where they receive information. So it's largely content development, but we learned to adapt them for each of these various social media and digital platforms.
Brilliant. So outside of content creation, I was wondering if you could talk on any specific, say, advocacy initiatives or campaigns that Leading Ladies Africa is currently involved in to advance gender equality and empowerment.
Yes. So one that we're probably most known for is the 100 Most Inspiring Women in Nigeria list, which we published, I think this is the 9th year now. So we've published consistently over the last 9 years. And the whole idea behind that program or initiative is really to show the impact that Nigerian women make all over the world. So it's for Nigerian women, but it's not limited to Nigerian women who live in Nigeria. So over the last 9 years, we featured 900 Nigerian women who are doing incredible work in different fields. And why that is important, why that advances gender equality, goes back to what I said about visualization. A couple of years ago, we had Wendy Okolo, who is an astronaut at NASA. And somebody was like, first of all, I didn't know that it was possible for women to be astronauts. Second of all, she's African. Third of all, she's Nigerian. Fourth of all, she's from my state. And I was like, okay, that's a lot. But a girl who is in Enugu or Nsukka, and like you suddenly then understand, like, I can be a scientist, I can be an astronaut, I can land rockets on the moon or wherever it is I want to land those rockets are. And so lists like that, for example, are very important because they show the work, impact, and contributions that women are doing, and therefore encourages others to either, follow similar paths or chart their own courses. We also have the 50 corporate women in Africa. Workplace advocacy is one of our pillars. And we found that, oh my God, there's so many women who are doing amazing things in the workplace. But because, again, there's that African thing of, I'm not going to toot my horn. Yes. I'm not going to draw attention to the work that I'm doing. We're like, you know what? I got you, girl. We'll do it for you. And so we have the 50 corporate women in Africa, which is published every May 1st. Again, like to just show women are advancing in the workplace. Here they are. Here is why it's important to, here's why it's important to you. And here is how they themselves are advancing gender equality and inclusion, even if they don't realize that that's what they're doing. But here is why. So those are examples of specific editorial interventions that we do to continue to champion inclusion and gender diversity, specifically for African women.
Brilliant. So from the great work that you've done and are doing over the last 12 years, what would you say are some of the key insights or lessons that you've learned?
I think the first thing that was interesting for me to learn is these women exist. And so a lot of mainstream media tells you, there are no women mechanics. There are no African women DJs. Women don't do that. So the joyful thing for me was to realize, like, hey, we just have to do the work of finding, but these women exist. That's the first thing. The second thing, the insights that I learned was, it's very easy to underestimate how much cultural and societal influences impact women.
Yes.
I'll use myself as an example. When I started to work in Silicon Valley, so I'm Nigerian, I come from a very respectful culture. So in many ways, almost like conflict averse or like too respectful.
Yes.
The American culture is the exact opposite. So it's like, speak your mind, say your truth. Well, even though I feel like they do it a little too much. But anyway, it's an exact opposite, right? And so women who find themselves in cultures or systems or situations outside of how they've been raised or how they've been culturally conditioned, then have to do a lot of learning and relearning,
yes,
but then still find a way to be true to themselves and their values and what they consider important. So the first thing was just realizing, like, these women are out there. Second thing was understanding that there are a lot of social-cultural, even political influences that impacts the way that women show up in different spaces. And perhaps like the final part was also seeing that this would have to be we would have to be in it for the long haul. Like, there are a lot of people who start programs or projects or institutions and they're like, in 5 years, we're going to solve this problem. No, you have to be in for the long haul because it gets challenging, because you face obstacles, and because change doesn't happen. I think change only happens fast in the movies or like in books, where it's like, they started in June and by July they had no. It's for the long haul. So those are some of like the insights that I've learned in the course of this journey.
Fantastic. So you've detailed your key learnings over the last 12 years. I'm assuming partnership and collaboration have been key to enabling you to do this great work over the last 12 years. So can you share some examples of partnerships or collaborations that have been particularly impactful towards your mission and goals?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, we wouldn't, we're a nonprofit, even though even though this sounds like a business, we're a nonprofit. So it basically means that even though we're not making profit, we have to make income. We have to have funds to be able to train women, to build programs and all of that. And I feel like we've had a lot of, well, not a lot of, before like future funders think, oh, they have all the money they need. We've been particularly lucky to have support from corporate bodies. So when we started out, we had support from, corporate organizations like Union Bank in Nigeria, FBN Quest in Nigeria, Coca-Cola, just a couple of those corporate institutions. But as we started to grow, it became very clear to us that we would need more institutional funders. So for those who may not be aware of what that lingo is, you actually have institutions who are set up to support gender equality programs or projects or initiatives. We have the Rockefeller Foundation, there's the Ford Foundation, there's all of these bodies. Corporate sponsorship is great, but they're not always very sustainable. And they look at their contributions through the lens of CSR.
Yes.
Which is all right. But if a company is just like, okay, this year we want to support women, next year it might be something else. The year after, it might be something else. So for us, it was like, hey, it's best to partner with long-term, with foundations and institutions and funders who say year after year, we're supporting gender equality. Year after year, we're supporting women empowerment. And so one of a more recent example of that sort of partnership is how we partnered with the Coca-Cola Foundation. One of the pillars that they support is economic justice and women empowerment. And so we partnered with them for our enterprise and leadership program, where we've trained 1,000 Nigerian female entrepreneurs, and we provided micro funding for 50 of them. And so we hope that next year we'll be able to extend that partnership and extend our reach to countries like Ghana and Kenya. So those are some of the examples. We've partnered with Guinness, we've partnered with 7-Up, we've partnered with Nestle, we've partnered with Stanbic IBTC Bank. But as we go deeper into our programmatic work, the focus is to really lean into institutional funders and donors who can support our work long term.
Fantastic. So you've detailed some of the amazing partners that you are currently working with or have worked with in the past who have enabled you to support gender equality. So if you look at it from a different perspective in terms of what are some of the main obstacles or systemic issues that hinder gender equality in African society?
Yeah, the first one I would say is culture.
Okay.
A lot of cultures in Africa are just not supportive to a woman advancing. And that's the simplest way to put it. So it's kind of like, advance, but not too much. It's like grow, but not too much. It's like become a manager, but I don't want you to be a director or a VP. I have friends who got married to seemingly progressive individuals or progressive men. And then, a couple of years in, the man is like, I love you, but I don't think you can be CEO. She's like, why? It's like, no. Because if you're a CEO, then you're not going to be a good mother. So we have all of these societal and sort of like cultural biases that stand in the path of women, right? So no matter how skilled or trained or how many opportunities a woman has, if those cultural barriers are still on her path, then she's just going to be stuck where she is. And those are the hardest to get through because it's for generations. It's like, this is how we do in my family. This is how we do in my country. This is how we do X, Y, Z. They've been sustained over centuries because they're just cultural and societal norms. So I would say like the first challenge is just culture. Culture is great, but like Chimamanda said, should I say Chief Chimamanda, culture is made by people, right?
Yes.
And it should advance people. It shouldn't hinder or hamper their growth. So I think that there's also opportunity to continue to make the changes that are necessary for women's advancement. So I would say culture first. And then second, based on our experience, would be political issues. So, for example, in the northeast of Nigeria, there's been a lot of, you hear things like bandits raise a whole village, kidnap women, do this to women. Women are often like collateral damage in political upheavals, in wars, in disagreements between communities. Women are often sort of like their collateral damage. And those are things that a conference can't fix. Those are things that a Zoom session can't fix. Those are things that government has to make a deliberate effort to say, because we want to advance women, we're going to make sure that there's political stability. We're going to relook at some of our cultural norms and practices that are harmful to women, and we're going to eradicate them. So it's very layered, but those are sort of like top two that we've witnessed.
Thank you for sharing that. So you've detailed systemic issues such as culture, political have been obstacles for gender inclusivity within Africa. Mm-hmm. So if we look at the positives, are there any positive trends or activities that you're seeing with regards to increased gender equality in Africa?
Oh, yeah. First of all, there's now more women. So if you look around, when I was growing up, I could not have imagined seeing a woman mechanic, for example. Never. But now there are tons of female African mechanics. There's more female CEOs now, African female CEOs more than ever. There's more women in director level, VP level. There's more female entrepreneurs now building global or regionally strong businesses. So yeah, there's more girls in STEM. There's more girls in science, technology. There's more, right? And yes. I'm glad. Even in cultural, for example, you hear guys say, oh, I want to have daughters because I want her to be the next president of XYZ. And you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. So even in the behavior, there's a change in that we're seeing more men practicing allyship. We're seeing more men saying, don't say that. Don't do that to her. We're seeing more men be sponsors, mentors, and champions of women. We're seeing a lot more of that, honestly, than we've ever seen before. So there's a lot of change that I'm happy about and that I'm proud of, but I want more, and it just has to be sustained.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. So if we go past current trends and looking ahead, where do you see Leading Ladies Africa in 5 years' time? What legacy or positive impact do you hope to make?
I think for me, the clear thing is obviously we want to see what I call our focus areas, right? Workplace advocacy, business and entrepreneurship, and leadership, right? We want to see women. We want to see girls. I think sometimes a lot of the conversations focus on women, but girls are girls first before they become women. So we also, in terms of where we see ourselves in 5 years, we want to build out our Girls in Leadership program. And it's a leadership and development and educational program for girls from underserved backgrounds. We want to expand that program into other parts of Africa because the need is there. But ultimately, we want to build a leadership institute for women. So kind of like a community development center where women can come in and have these sessions and have this training. And, there will be a daycare there for working mothers. There would be a library. A resource center is what we're looking to have within the next 5 years. That's kind of like our goal.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So where do you see yourself in the work that you'll be doing in 5 years' time?
Kind of like the same thing, right? I want to see some of the female entrepreneurs that have come through our programs are doing incredible work. So I'm looking forward to supporting them as much as we possibly can to build even more sustainable businesses. And then for me, perhaps on a personal note, is to continue to do work around SDGs, particularly around gender equality, gender justice, economic justice, and climate. I think that we also don't understand how much climate impacts gender equality. Women, for example, who live in drought-ridden areas, who were farmers before, or who were in the agricultural sector, can no longer do some of the things that they do because the rivers are polluted, the oceans are polluted. It's impacting who they are and how they show up. So I want to continue to do work around gender equality, economic justice, and climate, because I think that everything's connected.
Fantastic. I look forward to seeing the great work that you'll be doing in 5 years' time. Brilliant, brilliant.
Thank you, Tessa. I say that with also like trepidation, because, sometimes when you put something out, people are like, oh, but you said that 5 years ago. Like, what's your report card? Like, show it to me. But yeah, so I'm hoping to achieve all of that by God's grace. Amen.
Amen.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, African proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are good or when times are challenging. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
I have several. Maybe not mantras, but I'm a big, I journal a lot. So I'm very introspective. Brilliant. So I spend a lot of time introspecting and thinking about things. And something that came to me this morning after thinking and praying, was honor your transition. A lot of the time when we're transitioning, we fight it. Yes. It's like, oh, but I want everything to be the same. I want it to be perfect. But it's like, perhaps the thing to do is to say, this is uncomfortable. I don't like it, but it is opening me up to a new season and a new chapter, a new side of myself that I've not seen, a new business opportunity, a new role, a new sector, a new community. So honor your transitions, because your transitions are important in getting you to your next season, your next chapter, or your next opportunity.
Bam, fantastic. I like that. Brilliant. So as we're coming to the end of today's conversation, do you have any closing remarks, final calls to action for people who are interested in the work that you're doing?
Yes, I would say please follow Leading Ladies Africa on all our platforms. We're everywhere. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we are on TikTok. And, you can also reach out to us directly if you want to partner or fund some of our programs. The way to contact us is on our website or just hello@leadingladiesafrica.org. And we just really love to hear from you. And also for you, Tessa, as well. I think sometimes the Bible says that you don't put your light under a table. We need platforms like yours that help to tell our stories, because we can't tell our stories ourselves. So without people like you or your platform who are advancing or amplifying the work that we do, we may be like those lights that are under the table. So thank you for helping us as well.
It's a
be
pleasure.
The, light in the lampstand. Yeah. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. What a great way to close today's conversation. Francesca, thank you for sharing your valuable insights and perspective.
Thank you.
And also on your commendable work in promoting gender inclusivity and diversity. So yes, fantastic. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Teresa. It was amazing to be here. Thank you.
You've been an amazing guest. Fantastic.
Thank you.
We'll speak soon. Take care.
You too. Have a great day.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you, and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.